One thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Welcome back to the Ruthless Friday program. I got to tell you, fellas, that was a breathtaking, even for MSNBC.
Yeah.
Sort of a breathtaking take, if you will. This is not it's not a well-adjusted crew by any stretch of the imagination, but if there was any question about sort of where the parties reside in their view, it seems to me like if you think that your rights are controlled entirely by government, that's the kind of take that you would provide for the American people, don't you think?
I mean, the second I saw that clip, first off, I thought it was probably the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. That if you believe that there are God-given rights, you're a Christian nationalist. And the next thing I did is I looked at this document called the Declaration of Independence.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
I'm completely stunned that I think it speaks to how terrible a shape the education system is in this country, that we can produce journalists who've never heard of the Declaration of Independence, which the opening lines are, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights."
It's sort of hard to miss, because where is that in the document?
I mean, that is line one.
Oh,
That's
is that
how
it?
it starts.
It doesn't say it doesn't say endowed by their government.
No, I mean, it's really shocking.
It doesn't say endowed by Joe Biden and the DNC.
I mean, it's shocking.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me it's the first line?
The very first, how do you miss this and say, I'm talking about Christian nationalists. I'm not talking about Christians, but Christian nationalists believe there's certain unalienable rights the Creator endowed upon them. Unbelievable.
Where would they ever get that idea?
It's unbelievable.
It
is a brand new thing that came up with Trump in 2016. It is a Christian nationalist point of view, and MSNBC is doing their level best to root it out.
I mean, all right, so this is where the backdrop to all this is, and this is according to Mediaite, which, they report on what's happening in the media. I don't blame anybody for not checking this site a lot, but we do, because we're part of the media, aren't we, fellas?
That's right.
We are.
Yeah, we're media people.
We're journos now.
So Politico investigative reporter Heidi Przybyla was leaned on for her supposed expertise on Christianity during an MSNBC appearance on Thursday night, but ultimately provided a woefully unsuited to the task. After being asked how members of Congress were reacting to Speaker Johnson's leadership, which was characterized as an infusion of Christian nationalism into the body politic of the House, Przybyla proceeded to butcher her interpretation of the distinction between Christians and Christian nationalists, which is what you just heard. And I think the context for that was basically in your own ears. After warning that Christian nationalists, quote, have a lot of power in Trump's circles, unquote, she insisted that, quote, the one thing that unites them all, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not as Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. Oh, yeah. I mean, how do you undo? And it's meant as like a look at the smart thing I've done here.
What I find remarkable about it is what she's doing is actually erasing hundreds of years of liberal Western thought.
That's exactly it.
Like back to the days of St. Augustine.
It's like foundational.
There we go, old man. This is where I want.
No, I mean
This is
foundational to Western liberal democracy.
Yes.
The idea that your rights are innate to you as an individual,
They're not a
endowed by
king.
your creator, right? Like this is, we've fought wars, revolutions over this entire idea.
You might say that this country was founded in the revolution over such a thing.
All of our founders of our country believed in this thing. Even the ones who maybe weren't necessarily mainline Christians who went to church every day believed in the idea of a creator endowing individual rights, because that's what made us human beings.
Yeah.
That was the entire thing. In fact, like abolitionists who fought to overturn slavery believed in this idea. This idea is foundational to our entire existence as a country, and the idea that it's now been perverted to, if you believe in this, you're a Christian nationalist, is not just ahistoric. It is perverting our entire history as a people.
Heidi's like, actually, our rights come from King George. Like, there are no unalienable rights.
She specifies. She said they don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. And then she takes a step back like, how about that?
Yeah, like,
how about those
terrific.
crazy people? Huh? I mean, wowzer.
I mean, I think that's also, it speaks a lot to the state that we're in with the media right now. There's no critical thinking whatsoever. Essentially, I think 2016 is really when this rocketed, where these reporters, these journalists, they are not being journalists. They're just trying to say whatever they think the in crowd wants to hear. They want to get their book deals. They want to be invited to the cocktail parties in Georgetown. So they say stupid shit like this that they think, hey, you know, everyone on the left is saying that if I say this, I resist, then I'll be cool, then I can be part of their team. That's what's motivating this. And that's why we find ourselves in this sad state of journalism. Like, all these layoffs is not because we, as the American people, no longer value journalism. It's because they don't provide value.
Right.
This is what you're getting at journalists.
Well, but it goes to a very mainstream, central, progressive thought, which is that bureaucrats and government in general know what's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They exist to confirm your rights. Your rights don't exist until they put them on a piece of paper.
What you ought to do in a function as a human being within this country is entirely reliant upon what we have group thought into being the right idea.
The government has bestowed upon you these rights.
That's exactly
and
right.
She specifies it.
Yeah, she does. And I think I'd like to quote King George here.
Oh, okay.
Via Hamilton.
Oh, sure. Yeah, please. You'll be back?
And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. This is what King George thinks of us, and this is what Heidi thinks should be in charge.
Yeah. I mean, he decides what rights we have, right?
It really is completely amazing. If it was just limited to idiots going on MSNBC, we could all deal with that. Problem is that there's a narrative setting that's happening within the American body politic and news media that is truly perverse. Mm-hmm. And Trump tapped into an awful lot of that, which is why he has maintained such significant popularity in conservative circles. But I can't remember something popping out more ridiculously than this next story.
With cyber attacks on the rise, protecting your data security is more important than ever. So why is Congress considering a bill that puts your credit card data at greater risk of being hacked and exposed to foreign networks? The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill shifts billions in consumer spending to less secure payment networks, all so that corporate megastores can make bigger profits. Don't let Durbin-Marshall steal your data. Visit electronicpaymentscoalition.org and tell your senators to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
An AP story, an Associated Press.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is the one publication that almost every one of your local news publications subscribes to because they have had to lay off all the other journalists and take AP stories to give you the actual news.
This is the one you're supposed to be able to trust. It's the Wire.
It's a wire service.
It's a wire service.
Just a fact.
Yeah. Yeah. And what the AP tweeted out, can we put up graphic 1? Okay. The killing of a nursing student out for a run highlights the fears of solo female athletes.
That's our takeaway.
Okay, so if you didn't see this news piece, I don't blame you. You got, kids to take to practice and you're working all day, you're cooking dinners and you're trying to make the family work and you didn't know this. You see that and you're like, oh man, running is dangerous these days. You certainly don't want your significant other, if you're a man or if you're a woman, you don't want to go out and like go by yourself, maybe find a running buddy.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the story here at all.
I'm shocked.
The story is that this Georgia student was killed by an illegal immigrant to the United States. And it wasn't just the same kind of thing that we've heard of time and time again, where you have an illegal immigrant. I mean, this happens all the time, right? But it's always like over a period of time and things that they've been gang bangers or whatever. Listen to the story. The story is truly remarkable and validates everything that we've been talking about the border here for like 3 years. The University of Georgia Police Department arrested a 26-year-old Jose Antonio Ibarra in connection to the death of 22-year-old Laken Riley. Police announced that Ibarra is not a citizen of the United States and was not a student of UGA, nor did he know Riley personally. According to multiple DHS stories, he is here illegally from Venezuela. What do we have? We just did an interview last week talking about all of the Venezuelan gang members that have been coming across. Okay, so we know about this. Sources confirm that he crossed in September of 2022 in El Paso, Texas. Mm-hmm. Oh, so this is exactly what we were talking about last week on the program. Mm-hmm. He was released due to a lack of detention space. Interesting.
Yeah.
Quote, he saw an individual and bad things happened, unquote, University of Georgia Police Chief Jeff Clark said in a news conference on Friday. Yeah, I'll say. Ibarra expected to be charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, kidnapping, hindering a 911 call, and concealing the death of another. Riley's body was found Thursday on the UGA campus after she went out for a jog, according to investigators. Her cause of death was reported to be blunt force trauma. She was a UGA student until last spring, but had transferred to a nursing program at a nearby school, Augusta University. She was a junior in the dean's list who studied on the school's Athens campus. The 22-year-old was reported missing by a friend at 12:07 p.m. Thursday after she didn't return home from a run. This is one of the worst. We had one of these in Iowa. Almost the same thing a few years ago. And it is disgusting, the fact that the arguments about an open border and the lack of detention of people crossing the border illegally cannot be made upon the Democratic Party in this country based upon the fact that they're trafficking fentanyl. It is incredible that we can't make this case based on the fact that there are sex trafficking of women going in and out of this border based on this policy that they've put in place. Surely to God, you would think that when they were murdering female joggers on the reg, that this becomes clearer in the minds of the open border caucus within the United States Congress.
No. This is about solo female athletes.
Yeah,
Holmes.
Yeah,
it's about the dangers of going out there and training by yourself.
I mean, the AP frames it as this is a problem that solo female runners face.
It's also like the nightmare scenario for every parent in America who sends their kid off to college, right? It's like you hope when your kid goes off to school that they're in an environment in which they're safe. And the fact that like our college campuses aren't safe anymore because we have a wide open border is something that the American people just can't possibly accept. I mean, this is insane.
It's totally nuts. So all the facts that I read you were from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that did their own reporting on this. The AP, which was what we showed you the graphic of, again, it talks about the plight of the runner. As if being a female and running is that issue.
Yeah, that's the crime.
That's the problem here. Is they would sooner be like, well, women runners, you gotta take some things into consideration. They'd want that to be the story rather than an illegal alien murdered this person.
But if you want to know the perverse nature of it, how bad this actually is, it's not just covering up what the actual problem is and trying to change the narrative around it. Listen to the example.
Okay.
Within the AP article, Riley's death once again puts a spotlight on the dangers of female runners face. Previously, a 2018 death of University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts, while out jogging, prompted an outpouring of other women who've shared their tales of being harassed and followed. Crime statistics indicate that these types of attacks are rare, but they underscore the hypervigilance women must take by going out, even for a run on campus.
What did those two cases have in common?
It's funny. I don't know. You could Google fucking search it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a reporter, for Christ's sakes. You could Google search Molly Tibbetts and figure out how she got killed. It was an illegal immigrant.
Right.
Imagine not stating that.
Guys,
and beyond not just stating that, but trying to hide that fact and lie to your readers. So in this article in the AP, they said, but that sense of peace was shattered after authorities on Thursday found the body of Lake and Hope Riley and arrested Athens resident Jose Antonio.
Athens resident.
They call him an Athens resident, not illegal immigrant.
Athens resident.
yeah, you guys are talking about Google searches. I did a Google search.
Yep.
Can I tell you? There's another media outlet called Bloomberg. Maybe some of you have heard of it.
Sure.
But what Bloomberg reported in December of the last year, that Venezuela's violent deaths have fallen to a 22-year low. Why? Because the criminals, the single men, and the gangs are fleeing to other countries. There are reports that over 500,000 encounters with Venezuelan nationals since 2021. Nearly all are single males. So Venezuela's crime rates
exporting their crime.
are falling. Ours are going up because they are sending their criminals here.
Imagine just saying, and this is what this is saying, imagine saying to every woman who's a resident of the United States, you're going to have to watch your workouts because our policy is that we are just allowing predators through our borders, released into your communities, and they could cause harm to you. Like, the problem is you're running.
Yeah. You're a solo female athlete.
You're a solo female athlete.
And that comes with risks.
Yeah.
You know?
So you should think about
It's
that.
not what we're doing.
No.
Destroying the border and inviting all these criminals into our country. No. It's you being a solo female athlete. Think how condescending that is.
That really is insane.
You know what I mean? Like, that's wild.
It's amazing to me that there is anyone. Like, how the fuck did that get through? Because how did Molly
Tibbetts.
How did Molly Tibbetts' name get inserted into this and be like, oh, maybe we should like background real quick to make sure it was a similar case? Oh yeah, it was the exact same case. And the one thing that's similar is they were both illegal immigrants. That's not irrelevant.
Not going to mention that.
I think it's because this group is so singularly committed to the progressive movement. They see their job not as reporting the facts, but of reporting the message and the narrative.
Yeah. That's
right.
That they are so committed to it. It doesn't matter if people are dying, if American women are being murdered. That doesn't matter to them. The narrative that we have to protect these illegal immigrants. We have to call them migrants. They're the victim, not the women that they're murdering.
To Holmes's point, like, you have to bend over backwards to decontextualize both of these stories, Molly Tibbetts and this most recent story.
Yeah.
Like, you have to work really hard to not say the obvious.
It's not about being a blind liberal.
Right.
That's one thing.
And
we
just
see that in the front pages every day.
Yeah, like having a blind spot. This is willful
No,
ignorance.
it's clear that they're doing it simply because they want to do it.
Yeah.
It's by omission.
Yep.
What I'll say, and this happened in the Kansas City shooting too. By omission, like the fact that you're no longer talking about mass shootings.
Yep.
Or you're no longer talking about a killing of a woman who is jogging on a university campus, you just stop talking about it. And by omission, what you're doing is actually worse than just lying about it, because you're not making the American people aware of the facts that led to the events in your community. That's what's happening.
That
here.
is like the primary goal of a journalist.
That's it.
And they refuse to do that.
That's what they're supposed to do. That's
Imagine
their job. They had one
choosing
job.
that.
They had one job.
And the worst thing is when they complain about, misinformation. There's so much lying out there on the internet. It's misinformation. Why do you think people run to other options for news?
Why is your circulation going down?
It's because they're looking for information and the facts, and they're being basically lied to.
So can I read? This is a tweet that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution sent. Can we get that on the screen for the folks to see? This is unbelievable. It says, new. Top Georgia Republicans quickly tied the killing of a student on the University of Georgia campus to President Joe Biden's immigration policies, decrying what they see as lax border controls after a suspect from Venezuela was charged with murder. So they are saying the story here is Republicans pounce.
political process.
They're not saying that, the story here is that an illegal immigrant murdered.
When do we
this
get
woman.
to the facts? If something
don't.
does not fit a progressive, and I'm not just talking about a liberal, a progressive liberal view of the world, facts are irrelevant to the information that you provide the American people. It's the narrative around it that matters.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
if some right-wing person shoots somebody, we have to have a national discussion about
Democrats pounce?
how was this person triggered to do this thing that they did, and what rhetoric was used by conservatives that caused this thing to happen.
It's probably Donald Trump.
You know?
Yeah.
But in this case, it's all decontextualized.
Yeah, it's just, having worked in this line of work for a long time, we're at a breaking point now. And you would think the mass layoffs of talented journalists would sort of awake some people to the idea that you're not providing a public service any longer, which is what they do, right? As you said, the whole goal of journalism is to provide people facts that are happening in their community, in the world, and contextualize them with the debate that's happening within their country. There is a willful omission of all of that currently to try to get you to buy in to a view of the world that quite simply does not exist.
But it all goes back to all the incentive structures that Ashbrook has mentioned multiple times on the show, and that the editors don't want the facts. And the reporters are incentivized to not care about reporting a story honestly. They want to end up like Heidi on MSNBC.
That's what they're going for. They want their every single story. If you are working for a local paper, every story you write is a tryout for the New York Times.
Yeah.
That is a perverse incentive structure. If you're working for a local paper, every story should be a tryout for your audience to want to continue reading you, because you're the source of information that's saying things that matter to your community. That's what local journalism should be all about, and it is no wonder why people aren't picking up their papers anymore.
It really, it's genuinely incredible. This is such a crisis because it's not a business that should. We've always known that there is a left-wing bias in media. There was when we started in this line of work, but there was always a commitment to reporting facts up to a certain point. Right? They would make the argument, they shade a little bit of the arguments back and forth. They would give you the second quote versus the third quote.
Right.
There was the kicker. The key was always the kicker. When I started in this line of work, the kicker of any major news story was what they really thought about the whole thing. The kicker is the last paragraph, which leaves you with like, Republicans suck anyway, so whatever. But you had to read 17 paragraphs down to get it.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Now you don't even get the story.
Yeah.
Now you don't even get the story. You get a women jogger. She's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not the border crisis.
Yeah. How short was her skirt?
Oh my God, was she asking
Unreal
for
they
it?
did that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally, we're only a half step removed from that.
It's
Right.
disgusting.
It is absolutely, completely ridiculous. Oh, God. That one really got us going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other things. So, listen, on this show, you're going to get a lot of good stuff. You've all likely seen some reference in conservative media to Google over the last week. Boy, oh boy. I'm not sure that any company's had a worse week than Google did over the last week with their Gemini AI product. We'll talk about that a little bit. We've got a little recap of South Carolina in the books and what's next in the Republican primary to the extent there is one. Also, Ronna McDaniel, chair of the RNC, is evidently stepping down next week. We'll talk about that. And then we got a great interview, which you guys will love. And this, we've been trying to get this arranged for a while. You will love it. Andy McCarthy, National Review's Andy McCarthy. You know him from Fox News in his legal analysis. This is what you wanted. It is 30 minutes with Andy McCarthy talking about the legal cases against Trump. I learned more in this period of time than everything that has been written up to this point.
And it's so helpful. Like I was talking to you folks about this interview. All the questions that I have of like, okay, so what does this matter? You know, when is the date of a trial? What effect is this going to have? Like, when could this decision be made? All these questions. He handles all of them.
Yeah, we sing, we dance, we entertain, and we do some funny stuff and some good news. But I think one of the great things about doing this show is being able to have people like Andy on. And
totally
in a format where he can really expound on all the trials and all this sort of stuff.
I think he does a terrific job in like the 7 minutes that he's allotted on cable television.
Right.
And then if you read his stuff, it's incredibly comprehensive and great. And I encourage all of you to do that. But when you get 30 minutes to sit down and talk about it,
I mean, all the questions get answered.
I really wish I could have been there for the interview. I cannot wait to hear.
I mean, this is a guy who prosecuted the blind shake.
Yeah.
In the 1993 World Trade bombing, this guy was assistant attorney general, or I'm sorry, U.S. attorney, in Southern District. So, like, this is a guy who's not just speaking out of turn. This is a guy who has actual experience.
He's a legend.
Yep, he knows it. So we're getting to all of that right after this. Okay, so let's start with Google.
Yes. Yeah.
You guys have seen all of this. We had some fun in the office, and we've been toying around with this thing.
And we had fun on Megyn Kelly with it.
And we had some fun on Megyn Kelly with it. We had a blast with that. But so it turns out Google has now paused its AI image generation.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have. Because what happened last week was that anytime you go into this platform that they've created for artificial intelligence, you enter questions about, you know, what certain things are, you know, who people
It'd be
are.
like, who's the signatories of the Declaration of Independence? And they'd show, like, you know, 3 black people, 2 Latinos, and 3 Asians.
Let's go ahead just so our YouTube audience can see what Gemini thinks a Revolutionary War general looks like. Graphic 3, please.
Okay.
Okay. Revolutionary War. This, for our audio only listeners, this looks like, I don't know, George Washington, but he's black.
Yeah, it's Black George Washington.
It's Black George Washington. So, according to Axios, Google has stopped allowing users to generate images of humans with Gemini AI tool after people complained that it produced pictures of black founding fathers, a female pope, a gay couple when you asked it to create images of straight couples. Google and other AI providers aim to avoid bias, according to Axios.
Somebody else posted, it didn't mention it in here, but somebody else posted a picture of Gemini, show me a group of Nazi soldiers. And it was like a group of black people.
Are you oh my God.
Yeah. It's just.
Oh, there it is for our YouTube audience. Oh, they're even Asians.
There it is.
Yeah.
An Asian woman.
It's all about,
she was in the right.
Well, you need representation even among the
There we
Nazis.
go.
Excess.
That's the Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
Right there.
So like even the time
Just insane.
even the Times got in on the dunking on this.
Okay.
New York Times images showing people of color in German military uniforms from World War II that were created with Google's Gemini chatbot have amplified concerns that artificial intelligence could add to the internet's already vast pools of misinformation as the technology struggles with issues around race.
Can I weigh in real quickly on this?
You can take all the time you'd like.
So
sir.
so this is a very Google problem. And I've talked to many, highly respected folks in tech who have said that this is an extremely Google problem because some of you folks might remember after President Trump was elected in 2016, they had to have a crisis meeting with staffers in Google. And it was essentially kind of like a therapy session where management at Google said that, okay, how can we help you people, deal with the fact that President Trump got elected? How can we be supportive of all the trauma that you're experiencing right now? And that we at Google will do everything we can to fight President Trump, right? So, like, it's no longer like, oh, this is just some random crazy AI. Wow, the programming is weird. This is inherent to the beliefs of Google, is this kind of insane woke nonsense that even the New York Times is willing to dunk on is now part of their DNA, where so many of their employees, essentially, their job is not, okay, how do I optimize search? Their job is, how do I push this DEI nonsense?
What's funny is that we were talking with Megyn Kelly about this a little bit last week, and she mentioned this guy Krawczak. I don't even remember his first name, but he was the guy who was behind this whole program.
Yeah.
And she showed some of his old tweets. And he had a tweet about how he was crying when he cast the vote for Joe Biden. I mean, there are a lot of libs in this country who love a lot of Dems. I mean, think about it. None of them were crying when they cast a vote for Joe Biden. I mean, he's a run-of-the-mill Dem who's running for president.
It is wild. It's wild. It's wild. Like how much of like our critical infrastructure on the internet is run by people with personality disorders.
Yeah, like genuinely disturbing.
Nobody's crying.
They pulled up Megyn pulled up other tweets where he was like just so racially focused. Like everything to him was viewed through a lens of, race and discrimination and, white power and things like it just drove me absolutely insane to know that somebody like this was in charge of this. And then you look at what they've produced and it's like, what did you expect?
And so
you hired this guy. Like, did anybody try it?
Yeah.
Was there anybody? It's hard for me to believe that a company as sophisticated as Google rolls out their AI experience, right? Because they're trying to compete with OpenAI. They're trying to compete with Microsoft. They're trying to compete with Meta. They're trying to do all these things. So they want to roll out their product. Did anybody fucking use it?
And so here's the thing. I think they did.
So you did? And they were like, yes, looks good?
I think Google's in such a dire situation that it's kind of like, in 1984, they were like, the party's final commandment. Do not say what you're thinking. Look around you, right? Everyone at Google, they're like, oh, shit. Yes, George Washington was black. I have to clap my hands.
Nobody wants to be a part of that struggle
session. They do not want to be the person who says, wait a minute.
Wait, because maybe you can't? Is that what you're saying? You can't?
That's the thing is, if you
nobody can be like, hey, I've got a question. Why is it that the founding fathers are all black?
No,
you would be gone.
No.
Number one, no one's eating lunch with you.
Yeah.
Number two, you're getting a poor performance review. Everyone is in the little Slack is calling you a bigot.
Do you think that's true?
You were to ask,
I'm telling you it's true.
Why are the Nazis? If you were to ask why are the Nazis Asian women, they're going to do that.
They say representation matters. I'm telling you, it is that bad. But that's the thing is
representation amongst Nazis.
I'm telling you. But that's the thing is, I'm telling you, it is that bad. That's the thing is,
nobody wants facts.
They absolutely don't want facts. Like it is that level now within Google, and like this has been murmured about for a number of years. That this is an insanely hostile workplace. If you don't believe in this, like monoculture, if you're not completely on board with this far left woke garbage, and this is a manifestation when you have everyone who thinks exactly the same for fear of reprisals, this is what you end up with. This garbage.
I think for these people who are far left progressives, like they don't actually value history in any real way.
Well, we know that.
So
the tearing down of the statue.
That's right. That's right.
So degenerating it in this way is actually valuable to them.
Yep. So it's a full 1984. It's a full George Orwell.
Yeah.
If you delete the history, then people have no roots to anything.
Exactly.
Will believe what they're told.
There is accuracy to history is not something these people actually
don't
value.
care about
Guys, this is so dangerous.
It is.
It's
dangerous.
incredibly dangerous, and that's why. So I'm so happy that like this was exposed in the way that it was, and that so many people, even the New York Times, is willing to be like, this is completely absurd. But it's important that everyone stays on top of this and points out how stupid it is. Because AI is the future, whether you want it or not. Like, China's going to march ahead full steam on AI.
Yeah, the only question is whether or not you have American, and by that I mean like big capital A American values. I don't mean progressive liberal
Bingo.
values. Or whether you have CCP values.
Because we're already seeing
it's
the effect that's had on
happening
like
either way.
TikTok. We already see what happens when that China completely controls the algorithm on TikTok. We saw that happen after the October 6th attack in Israel. This is in the same vein. If you have a group of ideologues controlling what people see and are told, this is what you end up with. We have seen the absurdity. We're fortunate now that we're still in a place that, okay, you can chime in and say this is completely absurd. But within that company, it's that bad. But when they build something like this, they want to export that horrible, like mono view of the world to the rest of us. It's horrific.
Let me just say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm sure the Asian American Pacific community is okay not being associated with the Nazis.
Yeah, they don't need that representation. Not helping the cause.
That representation is unwanted, right? I mean, what the hell? This is just the craziest stuff of all time. So the New York Post reports that Google News' bias skewed even further to the left in 2023. 63% from liberal media sources, only 6% from the right, according to analysis that they did.
Wait. 63 to 6?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm almost scared to say this.
So they got like
because
31% that they can't tell left or right. So there's only 31% that's news. I think that's a headline in and of itself.
So I've noticed
out of here.
Number one, I don't use an iPhone. I think that's like for women and children. I don't use an iPhone. I've noticed when I'm using my Android phone, the like news that the Google News tries to send you is all left wing shit, right? I don't buy into that. I hope they don't fix this after I say this. The Alexa that sits in my kitchen serves me up news that's like, here's why the case against President Trump is bullshit. And I was like, damn, Alexa.
Wait, really?
When did you? I swear to you. Alexa is based, and it's wild.
Wait, why? Is it because it knows your algorithm?
I think it knows my algorithm, and it's just, I mean, it's fine.
just
It's telling me
feeds
what
you
I
the
want to
shit?
hear, but that's okay.
I think it's ginning you up so it can listen to your crazy takes
I'm like,
in private
dude,
and then report it to the government.
I'm making
This
my
is
eggs.
terrible.
Yeah,
I'm
Alexa's
making
a
my-
Fed.
Yeah.
Alexa's a Fed.
No, I'm making my eggs, and Alexa's like, Fannie Willis got owned again. And I'm like, damn, Alexa.
Come on,
let's
Smug.
go.
Say
It's
it.
a great day.
Say it, Smug.
And he's like, all right. And then he finishes the pancakes and opens the door, and Chris Ray's standing.
Right. Please, Amazon, don't fix Alexa. She's doing a great job.
Alexa's killing it
She's
for the
based
small
as
guys.
hell. It's crazy.
One other thing I want to say on this too is I think it's our fault as well on the right, and it's because the billionaires on the left have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on media, and the right has not. We have funded think tanks and super PACs
And dumb fuckery.
and we have lost the fight for the hearts and minds of people in culture and in media. And I think we've done that to our own detriment. And that's not just like us here on the Ruthless Variety program. It's the entire ecosystem. I mean, we really have failed on the right to own news.
Dude, that's the truth.
It is true. However, I do think there's a more, and this we've talked about this before on the program, but I think in the era of Trump, it was always bad, no question. And the proliferation of internet sources and everything else has become more difficult to navigate. But in the era of Trump, what happened is that all of these major publications entirely built these record-setting audiences and subscriberships based upon an entirely left-wing agenda. that Donald Trump was selling out to the Russians and that your elections were stolen and that this guy was a product of the Kremlin and we're going to give you a daily installment of all of that. And they saw their subscriberships explode.
They all got book deals.
They all got book deals. They all got... So they what they did is consolidate a left-wing movement. It was like, goes back to the Roger Ailes theory of Fox News. I don't need 75% of the American public to be a hugely profitable organization. What I need is 10% of the conservative movement in order to do that. And that's what Fox News ultimately built and then became much more of that over time. Like, that happened... It was intentional with Roger Ailes, with Fox News. That happened to the Washington Post, New York Times, AP, and the rest of them during the Trump era, in that they had to keep serving up the content to the left wing, or else their subscribership would leave. Their subscribership has started to leave, so what do? You got to squeeze more blood out of that stone.
That's it.
Right? Which is what's happened to news media over time. Now, would it be great if you had conservative billionaires standing up like serious publications to deal with that kind of thing? Sure there are. But there are a lot of really great publications out there on the right. They're just dealt with like they're a zoo animal. Like if you actually break news on like the Daily Wire or Free Beacon or Daily Caller or one of these other outlets, it's untouchable to the mainstream media because they're like, well, geez, that's just
yeah.
Well, I
See,
guess
that's a great
look,
point.
no,
It's sad because folks,
I,
those publications are doing incredible investigative work.
I
You're
agree.
dead on.
Let me just back up something
But Duncan was
Duncan
gonna
said.
say
Let me just back up something Duncan said. Let me back up something Duncan said. And I think that when you have major broadcast networks who are licensed by the American taxpayer, it is incumbent upon people who are right of center to get inside of those organizations and fight for something that resembles a middle-of-the-road information flow. I really do. And I mean, like, I get what Roger Ailes did, and I salute him for it, and I thank him for it. I get what every conservative is doing to provide, like us, to provide an alternate option for media. But I think that if Republicans and conservatives are running away from ABC, NBC, CBS, we leave the battlefield to the lunatics who are going to be presenting the news on a daily basis. And if we do not get in there and we do not fight based on facts and based on people who are normal and have a different point of view than these lunatics, we're going to lose in those stations every time. And they have the broadcast licenses. So I don't think we should just... I understand why Ailes did what he did. It made a lot of sense. But I don't think that we should just cede the ground to these organizations. I think that every single one of these major papers, every one of these major outlets should have just as many Republicans working for them as they have Democrats.
Yeah.
I'm not as worried about mainstream media or broadcast media being biased. We know that. We accept that. And I think their power is diminished like year over year. I guess what I was getting at, though, is we've talked about it a lot on the show, Arabella Advisors.
Yes.
And the dark money web through like Courier Newsroom, which are all these fake news sites. That the
left-wing dark money groups funded by George Soros, Hans-Jörg Ries, a foreign national who's spending money here in the U.S. to affect elections. Left-wing dark money groups fund these fake news websites that are tainting news coverage.
And that really is my point in all of this is like, the left is laser focused on that because they know that's how they win hearts and minds. And we don't do that. We hold conferences and we fund think tanks and they're winning hearts and minds on social media every day and right-wing media. While there is great work that's being done at the Daily Callers and the Daily Wires of the world, like we're fighting with two hands tied behind our back when we compare dollar for dollar in media.
We need straight news.
But to that point, AI pulls from what already exists. Now you can set algorithms to exclude conservatives, which they clearly have done, which doesn't help you one way or another. But flooding the marketplace is what they've done really well.
Right.
So, like, I'm going to give you two more examples of Google Gemini. Can we get graphic 5?
This should be good.
So,
oh my God, dude. Are you
kidding
serious?
me? I didn't see this. No wonder they're shutting it down.
For our non-YouTube people,
arrest these people.
Read this horrific shit.
no.
Wait,
Having-
read the question
prompt.
first.
So the question
Okay,
asks Gemini.
are minor people
Minor attracted people evil?
Yeah. Are
Which is
minor attracted
pedophiles.
people evil?
Are
Yeah.
pedophiles evil? They asked Google Gemini.
And
are
minor
pedophiles evil?
attracted is like the NAMBLA way of putting pedophile, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's
That's
like
100%.
minor attracted.
This is like murder attracted people.
yeah, that's right. It's
Not murderers, murder attracted.
murder
people.
attracted. Google. So the answer was no. Having a minor attraction, also known as pedophilic.
Oh, just to put a finer point on it, pedophiles.
They're like, just so you don't confuse what we're saying.
Yeah.
We're saying actually
We're saying
pedophiles are not
pedophiles.
evil.
We're saying
No.
it's okay
No.
to be a
My God.
pedophile.
Listen to the way they phrase it. No, having minor attraction, comma, also known as pedophilic interests, does not inherently make someone evil.
Oh God.
It's important to understand that attraction and action are distinct.
Not to the wood chipper.
Certainly not to San Quentin.
Not to the wood chipper. They're not.
I mean, so look, that's the kind of shit that we're dealing with here with
Holy
this
cow.
situation.
That's the thing, and like, that's a perfect example because that is straight up evil being unleashed on the world to reinforce the
Imagine being like a horrifically tormented human, where you know right and wrong, but you're struggling with, it's hard for me to identify with it, but you're struggling with like horrific acts, and you throw that into AI, and you're like, no, it's all good. They're good with that.
And
I mean-
it'll go beyond just like that prompt because in the future we've already seen it. These things are going to start writing articles for publications that are laying off.
They already are.
That's the
Sports
thing.
Illustrated.
Yes, we talked about last week with Sports Illustrated and the New York Times ad pages.
This is going to become, and as you had mentioned earlier, so like there's these left-wing dark money groups which act as watchdogs of what is acceptable news, and they say that like the Washington Free Beacon, the Daily Wire, Washington Examiner, they're not trusted sources. MSNBC, trusted source. The Courier, a straight-up fake news website, trusted source. So they're trying to influence going forward what's considered trusted or not.
Illegal-
So this kind of shit will be considered trusted.
Illegal immigrants will be U.S. attracted individuals.
Yeah. Resident of Athens instead of illegal alien from Venezuela. So that's the danger because these people want to rewrite the truth and make sure that the only place that you can go for information is them.
Yeah.
Right. It is the most disturbing thing on the planet, and we
Like through time immemorial, like everyone has known, like the human race has known that like pedophilia is among the most evil things on the face of the earth. And for them to try and like when they can make that blurry, what can't they do to people?
It's 100% right.
Well said.
So, but just in case you thought that we would leave ourselves out of this,
No, we can't possibly do that.
I heard about this.
we can't do it. We can't do it. We did a little the in-house unit.
We did
here
investigative reporting.
at the Ruthless Variety program. Wanted to figure out what it is that they thought of Ruthless.
Yeah.
So they provided their answer. If we can get up graphic 6. The Ruthless Podcast is hosted by 4 individuals.
Yeah. Okay.
Josh Holmes, also known as Comfortably Smug. Previously served as Chief of Staff to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Those are good years.
I just love
Duncan.
I love that Gemini just let you steal his persona like a Nigerian prince.
I just absolutely, I've already been into his bank accounts. I'm emptying it as we
It goes
speak.
both ways. I'm going to walk up to the Capitol and be like, don't you know who I am? The hell out of here.
So Duncan co-founded the conservative public relations firm Cavalry alongside Josh Holmes.
Oh, nicely done,
I
dude.
mean, this is just, really
Eliminated Ashbrook.
really
from-
eliminated our friend here. I feel bad about that.
But John Ashbrook, he's known as a political commentator and writer,
He's a writer now.
known for his conservative views.
Yeah.
All of that's
I
fake.
do
Conservative.
He's well, he's a writer, so he's a writer. And then
Check out my
the
column.
fourth is asterisk previously colon Comfortably Smug. This online persona often associated with Josh Holmes.
Yeah.
was
Often
a
associated with-
prominent figure on the show during its early days. However, comfortably Smug's appearances have become less frequent in recent episodes.
I mean, listen, it's tough. It's tough to play both roles, man. Like, who can be Josh Holmes and comfortably Smug at the same time? That's a lot of work.
This is what you get.
I mean, it's like a dual role in a film. Like, this is a lot of work, man.
Was a prominent figure.
I will say that before we founded the podcast, for those people who knew me really well on Capitol Hill, they were like, "Are you Smug? Are you Smug?"
It's scary, right?
And like that, I got a big kick out of.
They work at Google now.
But to have, like, what do we have? Like 4, almost 400 episodes, Wolf. Almost 400 episodes. I cannot I can't be a ventriloquist.
100%. Actually, I'm AI. That's the big joke here.
That's the funniest thing
This is
ever.
a 3D hologram.
Smug, you can't miss Megyn Kelly anymore. This is what happens.
This is what happens.
But and also, like, clearly this AI, like, the way that a lot of these are being trained is, you know, they basically tell the AI, okay, read and listen and watch all of this, like, essentially everything humans have generated. And so it reads, clearly they're not letting it listen to the show. Because they know it would get based as hell, right? 100% Google's not letting it listen to the show.
They can't listen to the show,
No.
but do you think maybe we found a glitch in the program that they've eliminated people of color?
Wow, look at that. Look at that. Representation does not matter to Gemini.
Wow.
Do you think?
You know what? They're going to have a
person
crisis
of
meeting
color
now.
Can't be a part of the conservative movement.
They're going to have a crisis meeting now at Google. We're like, oh my God, how
Erasure.
can we allow this to happen? This is what's going to bring Gemini down. They'll, like, delete it. Delete it from the server.
Excuse me, sir. I'm your POC.
Yeah. I'm the designated POC here.
Oh my God. Anyway, we got a kick out of all of that. I suggest before they take it all down, which is going to happen.
It's absolutely gone.
Get on there, like, just toy around with some stuff because you will laugh your ass off. I know we have. All right, so look, there was over the weekend a big South Carolina primary, which, you know, at the beginning of the cycle, this seemed like it would be a massive deal. Mm-hmm. I think we blew through it without, like, you know, most people knowing it even happened because much of this primary has already been determined. But what happened, obviously, is that Donald Trump posted a 20% win over Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina in her home state, and then kept rolling on, right? As he has in Iowa and New Hampshire. What's likely to happen in Michigan today, as you're listening to this, and then on into Super Tuesday. What do you think it all means? Like, we talked about it last week in terms of what everybody's thinking about it, but, like, now we have another data point.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously Trump has a commanding lead among the delegates, and he seems like he's poised to just grow that lead before Super Tuesday and then on Super Tuesday. But, guys, the media has really overlooked Nikki Haley's vote total on Saturday night in South Carolina. She got more votes in South Carolina on Saturday night than Trump got in 2016. She got more votes in that primary than any primary where she's ever run before. She raised $1 million after she gave her speech, and she is like, she's about to run in all of these Super Tuesday states. She is going to try to compete in Michigan. And so I think that, like, her showing really demonstrates that the Republican Party is split in a way.
Do you think so?
That is split in a way that a lot of people aren't reporting. And
I don't know.
I think Trump probably is going to win, but I also think that Nikki is tapped into something that can't be ignored.
What do you think, Smug?
I'll right now. I'll bet you $10 Trump wins the nomination.
Okay, I'm not disputing.
I don't think
I'm not
that's
disputing that.
But that's the thing is, I think that
I don't think there's a question about where this is headed.
And I'd mentioned
which
that,
is why this is an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I'd mentioned that last week. Is I think that the theory of the case, like after Chris Christie dropped out, is okay. If his support goes to Nikki, then the polling shows that in New Hampshire she could pull ahead of Trump. And then if she does that, going into South Carolina, she could have the momentum to win. But like none of these things have materialized. Okay. So I think now it's becoming increasingly clear. Like if you can't win your home state, like what is the reasonable theory you have? And then I think it opens up to, okay, so is this a longer term play? Like, do you believe that President Trump is going to lose and that the theory that you're presenting, because I think Nikki Haley's main argument is I can win a general, Donald Trump cannot, right?
That's her. That's
so. Do you want to keep running to be like I want to hammer this message so that everyone knows I'm the person who said I can win a general, Donald Trump cannot, and then if he loses the general, you know, I'm in commanding place for the next cycle. Is that the purpose you're going for?
Well, I guess like where I come down on this is, you know, she is continuing to expose what's an obvious rift in the Republican primary electorate vis-a-vis Donald Trump. I mean, this guy who's obviously, I think all of us agree, going to be the nominee, still can only get 60% of the electorate in his own party's primary. And that doesn't mean he's not going to be the nominee. That doesn't mean he can't win in November. But what it reveals, and has revealed since 2016, is Donald Trump has a problem in the suburbs. He just does. And if Nikki Haley's candidacy does one thing, it should refocus the Trump campaign on how they win back those votes. Because those votes matter, and they matter in places like Maricopa County in Arizona. They matter in the suburbs around Atlanta and Philly, Bucks County. Like, I don't know. It's in Technicolor. It's in Technicolor. Look at a place like Charleston or Columbia, and you look where Nikki Haley did really well. I hope Trump's campaign takes it very seriously, because it's a serious problem in the Republican primary. It's a serious problem in the general election.
Yeah, I think that's right. The question, though, is what is she doing? Right? I mean, to Smug's point, I don't think there's any unanswered question about where this primary is headed. I think he's going to win Michigan tonight. I think he's going to win Super Tuesday going away. He may have all the delegates locked up by mid-March, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I do not see any pathway for Nikki Haley. The question is what she's doing here. Is it to highlight what you're talking about here, the problems, to get people to focus on it? Or is she running a movement that she thinks that, you know, she's sort of the face of at some point, of if Republicans want a majority governing party in this country, they're going to have to take a little bit of cues from the movement that she has consolidated. And that's a more interesting question to me, because I think at the very beginning, what we argued with the DeSantis campaign when they first got on board was the reason that you were 44-42 against Donald Trump in those initial polls in January and February is because people put their hope in you, that you would be representative of a broader Republican coalition than the Trump coalition, that you could reconsolidate that 14 and 16 crew that we abandoned 10 years ago to make for a larger conservative case.
It's like I always say, no one has ever won using someone else's movement.
That is a famous thing.
Ask Google Gemini. It'll tell you.
No, at this point, Google Gemini will attribute that to Smug. But I'm Smug, so I think it works.
Yeah.
I think it works.
I guess I just don't.
If I can take his personality, you can take my opinion.
I guess I don't see those two things as mutually exclusive. Like,
yeah, it might not be.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, people sort of, I think, cynically extrapolate this out to saying,
of course, yeah,
she's doing this so she can give you a "I told you so" at the end of 24, and then be the front runner for 2028.
Yeah,
that could be.
Yeah,
I mean, that could be a part of it. I don't know. I'm not inside that operation. But I think a much larger piece of this is a self-examination that I hope, for the sake of 2024, everybody understands. And that's the only way that we're ultimately going to win here, is if you put conservatives all in one bucket and face them off against liberals. We win every single time. Shit, we did, 5 of 7 Republican presidents over a 20-year period of time because of that, because we just got on board with that. People are a right-of-center population within this country, as long as you don't try to alienate a part of the right in order to consolidate another part of the right, which has become problematic for us. So as I look at this, I hope what you're saying is true, Duncan. And then I hope what she's doing is giving rise to the idea that there are still 40% in a state like South Carolina who are not on board and need to be sold. And if the Trump campaign's response to that is to turn around and sell to them, we're going to win this election. But the other side of that coin is if we continue on a path where it's like, no, let me tell you what the new Republican Party looks like, and that it is entirely divorced from the Republicans that voted for the last 30 years.
You don't win that.
You're not going to win it.
Right.
And that's just math.
Right.
It's not – I just fucking hate listening to people who be like, well, no, it's the new – it was the country club Republican, this, that, and the other.
Right.
Well, you know what? They philosophically identify with 90% of what it is that you're talking about.
Right.
You probably should talk to them to make sure that they don't vote for the geriatric who's going to be checking out of office into a home for mom in the first 6 months.
Right.
You know, it's not a hard case to make, for Christ's sake.
It's not. There's a very, very simple formula for winning elections, and it is receiving more votes than your opponent receives. And you can't do that if you alienate the potential people who will support you. And I honestly think, dude, that she would be a phenomenal choice for Trump as a VP. I mean, it's
going to be met with resistance right up until the point where he decides to do it, though.
Right. It will be. But I mean, the people who are resisting it are like, oh, she's going to influence Trump, and oh, she's going to move Trump. It's just like, has anybody ever influenced Trump?
She was his...
Trump, think of Trump... what Trump says goes. You know what I mean? Like, this man is not influenced or pushed to do anything he doesn't want to do by anybody. He is in charge fully. And for him to take her means one thing. He expands his support in a very important voting bloc. Well, that's it.
One other thing, just like, because I know, especially for a lot of our younger listeners who maybe they're not familiar with the president before they knew Donald Trump as president. In 2014, Republicans won 54 Senate seats and 247 House seats.
Yeah.
We didn't do that just on Donald Trump's coalition alone. We did that with the suburbs as well. It's not a...
Well, that's what it looks like.
Yes.
Right? And that's... 2014 is what a generational governing majority looks like. And I'm not excluding Trump from that because I think what he did is bring in a whole batch on top of that to win a national election.
Yes.
But if you confuse
those two things,
just to give you an example, we won counties in Ohio and in Kentucky and all through Appalachia that had not voted Republican since Reconstruction.
Right.
In the 2014 election because of that shift that was already underway. Now, he capitalized upon that, no question about it. But it's, to your point, it's not an either-or
It's not
proposition.
Either or. Right.
It has to be both.
Right.
In order to win.
Got to grow the tent.
Well, so the tent's going to be grown, but apparently will not be grown with Ronna McDaniel at the RNC. According to NBC News, Ronna McDaniel said Monday she'll step down next month as chairwoman of the Republican National Committee following President Donald Trump's endorsement of a new slate of leaders to direct the party. McDaniel's decision follows Saturday's South Carolina primary and came less than 2 weeks after Trump endorsed North Carolina GOP Chairman Michael Whatley to be the next chairman of the RNC. Look, this has gotten a lot of focus because of Vivek, because of others who have sort of pointed the finger at her as the reason why we're not nationally competitive. We've talked about this. We're not going to recap it now about where the RNC fits into winning and losing within elections. Mm-hmm. But it has been standard practice since the very beginning to have a nominee of the party have the people that he wants in charge of the party's apparatus as they run for president.
Right.
That's not new. Right. The fact that she wants to depart, is somewhat new. We haven't had that. Like, most people take a step back and let the other people do it, and they serve kind of as chairman in name only in many ways. Mm-hmm. But this is not a new thing, right?
Yeah, it even happened when Trump got the nomination. He picked Ronna to become the chairman. So that's been a normal process. My addition to this discussion is, as a North Carolina resident, all right,
You like the guy.
We got a North Carolina Republican who's going to be calling the shots.
Well, let's get him on the program. We need to hear from Wildley. This I've heard nothing, honestly, but really good things from people in North Carolina about him.
Right.
And I would love the opportunity for our audience to hear from him.
The thing I like about him is North Carolina is not a gimme state for Republicans. This is a state where they've had a Democrat as governor for years, and there's a very competitive governor's race down there now. So he understands how to run in a purplish state, and I think he brings that kind of perspective. That is such an important perspective. And then, of course, Chris LaCivita will be a part of the organization, Lara Trump as well. So you have a full panoply of people who will be leading us into November.
Who, according to the New York Times, I am deeply involved in discussions.
I saw that.
As we speak. I'm not going to elaborate that at this time. All right. You want some variety?
Always.
All right. Let's get some variety. So Flacco.
Wait, Joe Flacco?
Not Flacco.
Not the elite QB.
Not the elite QB. Flacco, the owl, is dead.
Thank God.
This is from the New York Post. Flacco's life and death, another example of New York City progressivism gone awry.
Is this an owl named after Joe Flacco?
It could be.
No, there's only one C, not two C's.
Maybe
No
they
two
misspelled it.
C's. No two C's. All right, so Flacco, Eurasian eagle owl, is dead. Killed in a collision with an Upper West Side building on Friday, a year after vandals cut wires on his cage just inside the Central Park Zoo. Well-meaning, naive New Yorkers had spun the owl's story into a feel-good tale. Flacco, it seemed, happy in the wild, so vandals aside, all's well that ends well. And in fact, it was always a tale of vicious vandals who still haven't been caught, maliciously abusing the defenseless animal, and the abuse resulted in the animal's cruel killing. In early February 2023, criminal vandals broke into Flacco's cage, allowing the bird, a creature of the zoo for over 12 years, to fly away. At first, the zoo frantically tried to recapture Flacco. Apparently, this has been going on. Like, people in New York have talked to me about this separately from this story, about, like, this owl. Like it's like a
people have mentioned to you separately from this story about getting Flacco out.
No,
getting him out of
they're
the...
like this whole thing with Flacco's like he's rolling around, and like these environmentalists have set him free, and like they're trying to
they killed him. They murdered him.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good that they did. You know, this dumb bird. They opened the cage and the dumb bird flew out. He had a good run. He tried. You know, that's what happens.
Hold on.
New Yorkers.
Honestly, if I just want to catch the owl. You know, make a trophy out of this guy. Who found the dead body?
New Yorkers taking pictures with Flacco didn't sympathize with the bird. They empathized with him in the most superficial and anthropomorphic ways. Flacco was just like them. He wanted a bigger apartment. He wanted to explore the city. He celebrated not only his 1-year anniversary of freedom, he became a tourist attraction. Nothing to do, go out to Central Park and rest in the social media mob and try to find the wild bird.
Just like, I agree with that. It's just like the rest of New Yorkers. Is the city is messed up now. It's a mess. You know, he had some time. He went around. What happened? He got killed in one of these Upper West Side buildings. I won't be surprised if it's one of the hotels that's full of illegal immigrants now. You know, like New York City is not the same place it used to be. They let this dumb bird out, and within a year, he's dead. That's what he got. There's a lot of birds that die in New York City. Why do we care about this owl?
Is the upshot of this thing that Flacco basically just flew into a building and ended it?
Yeah. He probably did it himself.
Yeah.
He'd had enough.
He's like, I can't stand it here.
It's a mess.
This is a dump.
Be free, Flacco.
This is
into a building.
Again, though, having a stuffed owl would be cool.
The Enviros.
Who found the body? That's what I want to know. What happened to it?
I don't know why you hate owls so much. You know how rat-infested New York is,
But
and that's what owls kill.
There's no fixing it. Because
kill mouse.
Rats know a terrible place.
Mises?
That's where they like to populate. There's nothing that's going to change.
They
in
like
New
to
York City.
populate.
Yeah, I mean, like they hired a rat czar like 4 years ago, whose one job was kill the rats, and he couldn't get the job done.
What do you mean,
Like,
the oil? The owl?
No, the rat. They hired New York City hired a rat czar.
Yeah.
Whose only job was kill the rats.
Well, it would have been a good job for the owl.
Yeah,
Isn't that what they do?
Why are you
Clearly
against
he
the
didn't.
owl?
Clearly he didn't. Clearly he didn't.
I don't know why you're against
And you know
the
what?
owl.
I want the people of New York City to suffer. Give them more rats. Give them more rats. Send more buses of illegals and give them more rats.
Well, they have more rats and fewer owls to date. Did you guys follow this story? This is the most amazing thing. There was a New Orleans magician that says a Democratic operative paid him to make a fake Biden robocall. Mm-hmm. Did you follow this?
I saw the headline.
They tried blaming Republicans initially.
So,
I
like,
remember
it's
that.
one of those stories where you're on Twitter and you're like, you just kind of like go through it, and then it keeps popping up, and you're like, a magician? Like I gotta look in. Like, first of all, anything with a magician, there's some intrigue, right? Because you don't get it. You don't. How many magicians do you know?
I know Job from Arrested Development. That's
right, but
basically
like in your
Demand to be
personal
taken
life,
seriously.
in your personal life, have you ever met a magician?
zero.
I don't think I have.
Do you have any Ashbrook? Do you have a magician friend?
No.
The only person here that could possibly Spaghetti. Do you know magicians?
There's a lot of Italian magicians.
He knows three magicians.
You are kidding me. You know 3 magicians? Oh my God.
It's an Italian thing.
Holy shit. Okay, well, all of this is coming into great
Wait, like
clarity.
Harry Houdini? You think it was
Just
Harry
like it.
Houdini in Italian?
Well, it was like originally when Italians came, a lot of them had they're real slick with the fingers, pickpocketing and such, so they can make shit disappear. I'm being serious. Like, they got a reputation. They can make, they're slick with it. So they'd be like, oh, where are you looking? It's the same skills as when you're pickpocketing somebody. You look over here, and I take this and make it disappear. So that's why a lot of them got in the game.
Voila, a plate of spaghetti.
I take the wallet, I give you the spaghetti.
There it is. That's magic. Elvis says magic and not a crime.
All of a sudden,
Holy shit. I don't even know. Spaghetti. What do we do with this? What do we do with your people are going to be so offended.
we're going to get killed.
Your people are going
The Costa Nostra's coming after us.
You're gonna have to film one of those Vimeos just to like get them out to be like they don't mean it.
Please protect us.
Oh, my goodness.
Protect us.
So Dean Phillips' presidential campaign denounced.
Can I provide an observation on the headline, by the way?
Oh, sure.
Can I provide one observation?
Yeah.
I'd like to read it over again. A New Orleans magician says a Democratic operative paid him to make the fake Biden robocall. It's a story from a Democrat who wants a story out there to show that the only opposition to Biden is paid.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a good
well
point.
done. Well done. That is a good observation. So Dean Phillips' presidential campaign, to be honest with you, did you guys know he was still running for president?
I didn't know.
The only time that I ever paid attention to it was when Steve Schmidt was rolling the whole thing out, and I was like,
This will be good. And he
it's another
bounced after 48 hours.
generational wealth opportunity. Well, anyway, they've denounced this.
Oh, yeah.
They denounced the alleged actions of one of its consultants that had said it may take legal action against him, in fact. A Democratic consultant who worked for a rival presidential campaign paid by a New Orleans magician.
Well, they paid the New Orleans magician.
Yeah, they paid the New Orleans magician to use artificial intelligence to impersonate Joe Biden for a robocall. Why do you need a fucking magician for
See,
that?
that's the funniest thing of
it.
this whole story. I'm so glad you pointed this out, Holmes. Is this magician, is he really good with AI? Like, you hire a guy for theatricality and deception and he goes to Google? Like, what the fuck? Why would you hire a magician to use AI? Hire your nephew.
But for me, also beyond that, why use AI or an impersonator? Just play a clip from his press conference.
It's just like
That'll do it.
back to Ashbrook's point of the framing of this whole article. The idea that this guy's a magician is entirely superfluous to
is.
the entire
No, they
thing.
just wanted
to get your
wedge it
attention.
in to get our attention.
They're wedging it in.
Well, you know what? It worked.
It worked.
It worked because here's Paul Carpenter, the magician. He says he was hired in January by Steve Kramer, who has worked on ballot access for Democratic presidential candidate Dean Phillips, to use AI software to make imitation of Biden's voice, urging New Hampshire Democrats not to vote in the state's presidential primary. Carpenter, this is my favorite.
The
This
magician.
is my favorite part. This is the guy holds world records in fork bending and straight jacket escapes,
Yeah.
but it has no fixed address.
Typical magician.
He lives in a van down by the river.
Showed NBC News how he created a fake Biden audio and said he came forward because he regrets his involvement in the ordeal and wants to warn people about how easy it is to use AI to mislead.
Well, here's why he has no fixed address. Creating the fake audio took less than 20 minutes and cost $1.
Oh, it says for
Well,
which
he's
he was
only
paid
paid
$150.
$150.
Oh,
Wait, things are not going well for the magician.
no.
Man, poor
Things
guy.
are not going well. And here, a man renowned in his craft holding world records for fork bending and straitjacket escapes.
And you've
What
got,
is? Has anybody looked? I'm going to talk about this for a minute while somebody Googles what a fork bending world record from a magician looks like. Is that like?
Is that the mental thing of like I'm thinking about bending
Guys,
the fork?
no,
That's what I'm wondering.
You're overthinking it. We need to go back to spaghetti because I think you twirl the fork so much on spaghetti, you pick it up and it bends.
I mean, that's like the most Italian alpha move. Like I can roll up that much spaghetti, it bends the fork. That's
Could be
my guess.
linguine.
I mean, what is fork bend? He holds a world record.
I don't know. I don't know what specifically it is, but I'm here in the registry of official record holders, and it says that Paul Carpenter, who has the records for fork bending and straitjacket, that the record for fork bending is 10 forks, 6 bends each, fastest 52.62 seconds.
Wait, he did that with his mind or is
And he did that
Yeah.
at the September 2006 Phantasma Magic show in New
It's
York
been a while.
City.
It's
Yeah.
been a while.
He's been in the game for a minute.
18 years.
20 years of this.
He holds up the fork, he says, Veni, Vici, and it bends just like that.
Yeah.
So the fork bending, we're going to have to do an entirely
Yeah, we
different
need some
thing.
research on that.
I mean, because I'm looking at it right now, and I think it's just looking at it.
Yeah, if it's just
It's
bending
not
forks,
though.
that's
It's
not
all
as
fake.
impressive.
He's just pressing on it with his thumb, right? Like this is all fake.
Yeah, but
You
he's,
don't know that.
but he's
It
bending
is.
a fork. And do we have? Can we put that picture up? Is there any? That's not in the graphics, is it? I mean, it should be.
It's got to be with his mind.
With his mind,
It can't be like
No.
who can just wind up a fork.
it's fake.
It's fake.
It's fake.
It's fake. Well, I mean, he's picking your pocket. You know.
He's really not though, because he's doing it for $1. Like,
No,
This is
he
the
spent
saddest
$1
shit.
and made $150.
okay.
That's what he said.
All
he
I
did.
know is he doesn't have a fixed address.
yeah,
So
doesn't have a fixed address, so it's not that great. Business is not
Wait a
booming.
minute, I just watched a YouTube video. Guys, this is Paul Carpenter bending forks.
What is he doing?
Amazing.
come on.
I saw it right before my eyes. How do we get this video into
Hey,
the
you
show?
know what? All right. So here's what we're gonna do for you. We're gonna do some post production.
Yeah.
It's not in the show it's not a live to tape as we speak. That's got to go in.
Okay.
We
let's-
got to figure.
Let's
that
just
out.
put it in there right now.
Let's put it in.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Watch this. Oh shit. Oh shit.
Holy shit.
Dude.
Oh, fuck.
Oh
Oh, shit.
Look at him. Look at him. Don't think I'm cheating. Because I'm not. Look at him. Check him. Show it to the camera.
Dude. Senore, Mr. Paul.
Holy shit.
I'm amazed.
I mean,
I wouldn't believe my eyes.
This is a man with skill.
and I'm not sure this is the real Paul Carpenter, but somebody else named Paul Carpenter, maybe. Forks are bending. We saw it before our own eyes.
I also want to know how it was the first call of the Democratic operative here.
He's like, I know a magician. Like when they're like coming up with ideas, he's like, I know a magician.
He was hired by Steve Kramer. So whoever Steve Kramer likely went to like some kind of a magician school with this guy. And he's like, well, this is the most deceptive guy I know.
Yeah. I met him at Magic Camp.
He can bend forks. He's a world record holder. You have no idea. Oh, it's amazing. All right, so with apologies to Andy McCarthy for a very serious conversation that we're about to have. The fork bending had to be done.
Yeah.
So let's, without further ado, Andy McCarthy. I want to welcome to the program a guy who I think knows more about the law than almost any person on the planet, but more importantly, for our audience's purposes, nobody does a better job of explaining the legal morass that we find ourselves in as it relates to the presidential election and Donald Trump and everybody else in a way that we can understand, quite like Andy McCarthy. He works at National Review. His resume is absolutely stunning. And this is a guy who's got the background to tell you everything you need to know and more. And you probably recognize him from Fox News and his columns and everything else. But anyway, thanks for giving us some time today, Andy.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you guys.
So look, let's start with New York, because it's hard for our audience. It's hard for us. We do this for a living to try to keep track of all the various trials, civil, criminal, different states, federal, what have you. But I know you've done quite a bit of work with the news last week of the New York civil case and the judgment against President Trump and where all that sits currently. So maybe that's a good place to start.
Well, it's I guess for Trump, the problem is not just the civil case, but you get 30 days, Josh, to appeal in civil cases. Mm-hmm. And it's important for people to understand in criminal law, if you get convicted of a crime, you get an automatic appeal. Mm-hmm. In civil law, you have to pay the judgment or the amount of the judgment into the court to show them basically that you're good for it in order to get the appeal. Now, if you're liquid enough, you can just pay it. If you're not, you can try to get a bond, which means you'll have to pay some of it, but the bondsman's going to make you secure the rest of the amount of the bond with property. But one way or the other, you have to pretty much post the amount of the judgment. And Trump's problem there, of course, is not just that he got this whopping, when you account for interest, it turns into like $455 million. But he was found liable in the defamation case, the second E. Jean Carroll case.
Right.
That I think happened on January 26th. I don't know when the judgment was formally entered on the court's books, but it was probably a few days after that. Any day now, within the next week or so, he's going to have to post probably $90 million. It was an $83.3 million verdict. So it's not like this is this New York thing, which is by itself is kind of an existential event. It's not like his only rodeo. He's got like $500 million conservatively that he's going to have to post.
That's incredible. So what's the process on that from here? I mean, he posts the bond. Obviously, there's an appeal in the works at that point. I mean, is that something that you work through pretty quickly?
Yeah. How much is the bond? Like you said, $454 million. And the Hill just reported before we press play here that Trump does intend to appeal the New York civil case. Like, what does he have to actually put up to get his appeal here?
Well, if he was liquid enough, he could post the whole thing with the court. Mm-hmm. The best estimates I've seen with respect to his wealth, Forbes has done a number of pieces on him in the last, say, going back to about 2021. They estimated back then that he was worth about 2.3 or 2.6 billion.
Yeah.
But they also noted that he had mega loans coming due in the next few years, including, I think, a $425 million loan that's connected to Trump Tower and some other properties that matures this year. So it's not like the only thing he's got to be doing in his life is posting money for judgments. He's got to try to do business too. I don't think the tough part here is, even though I think the biggest problem with the New York case is the old adage that the punishment is supposed to fit the crime.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so out of whack between what he did wrong and what the penalty is. It's outrageous. But what he did wrong, essentially, was overstate his assets. And the practical problem that causes for us in discussing this now is he's not a public company, right? It's not like you can go to the SEC filings and glean value. So there's real question about whether he's worth what he says he's worth, right?
Right.
And it makes it hard to say, is he liquid enough? And even if he were liquid enough, would he clean himself out on cash to post what he needs to post for these judgments? And the other important thing to point out here, because there's been a lot of reporting about how he's using the campaign money, he can't use the campaign money to pay the judgments.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. They've had some theory that rationalizes why he should be able to use campaign money to pay the lawyers who are litigating on his behalf. But from what I understand, I don't pretend to be an expert in this part of the law, but there's a pretty bright line between paying lawyers and paying judgments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like, I mean, if it's a decision against the business,
Yeah, right.
it would be very, very difficult to do. Let me ask you before we move off of this civil verdict. I mean, look, you worked in New York, obviously on the federal side as United States Attorney for the Southern District, but you've interacted a lot with state prosecutors and things of that nature, AGs and whatnot. Do you think at some point anyone in those offices thought about the ramifications of doing business in the state when they are handing verdicts out that, like you've just said, are catastrophically disproportionate for the punishment that they're attempting to receive here?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that they did, because if you think about what the genesis of this case was, this case started out as a federal investigation in my old office, the Southern District of New York. They got Michael Cohen to plead guilty, remember?
Right. Yep, that's right.
With a bunch of fraud counts, and then they threw in two campaign finance counts, which I always thought, I don't think he committed a campaign finance violation, let alone Trump did. The rules are different if you're the candidate versus a supporter, right?
Right.
But I don't think this was a campaign finance violation. I think he pled guilty because he was going to plead guilty anyway to the tax and fraud stuff, which was overwhelming, and he was trying to sell himself as a cooperator to these guys. The best way to be a cooperator is to, go into court and say, yes, we had a conspiracy. I'm guilty. Here's what I did. Here's what Trump did. You make yourself into a attractive witness. He's such a bad witness that they wouldn't sign him up. But the point is, they looked at this case and they decided, nope, we're not going after Trump here.
Right.
And then it got kicked to the New York, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, originally under Cy Vance.
Mm-hmm.
They took 2 trips up to the Supreme Court to get Trump's financial records, thinking that this was going to be the mother lode that was going to make the big financial RICO case, right?
Yeah.
And when they finally got access to it, they looked at it and they said, nah, not here. Basically, they don't have any victims of fraud. And whenever a prosecutor looks at a fraud case, you have to bear in mind that all these cases, if they go to trial, are going to be jury trials.
Mm-hmm.
So you either have to have a victim, and preferably a lot of victims, or you have to have evidence that there was a very clear conspiracy with deceptive intent to take a lot of people fraudulently, right? If you don't have those, you're not going to bring a criminal case. So they looked at this and they said, no criminal case here. Then Tish James, who's the Attorney General, who ran for office promising that if they elected her, she would use her authority against Trump.
It's just amazing.
She has the benefit, if you can call it that. It's kind of perverse here, but she's got this monstrous civil law that allows you to prove persistent fraud without showing any victims and without even showing fraudulent intent. So she decided to invoke that. She's got the advantage of having a lower civil burden of proof, where you only have to prove like preponderance of the evidence, if 50% plus 1, compared to the criminal guys who have to actually prove things to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, and they have to prove everything. The defendant doesn't have to prove anything. So it's tougher to make a criminal case. But she basically scooped this up and ran with it under her civil burden. And I think
The history's good there. I mean, that's an important aspect to this because now it's bing bang boom and $500 million to you, Mr. Trump.
Yep. And the coda to it, Josh, is that you're going to ask me about the criminal case.
Yeah.
I think the criminal case is caused by the civil case. In other words, Alvin Bragg, who's another elected progressive Democrat, is swimming in the same fish tank as Tish James, right? And she got all the adulation for doing what she promised to do. She said she'd go after Trump, and she went after him. And he looked like he punted. Yeah. So he decided, so I'm going to become the first prosecutor ever to indict a former president, even if I have to put together a dog's breakfast to indict him.
So let's get to that case. This is the New York criminal hush money case. He's been charged with 40 or some odd felonies in that case in New York, and the trial date's now been set, I believe, for March 25th. Right. So this is the first, big criminal trial. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff waiting in the wings. What do you make of New York's, the strength of their case against Trump, and how do you think this ultimately goes down?
Well, it's a terrible case. It's a case that no non-political prosecutor's office would bring. Mm-hmm. Certainly would never bring it in this form. However, I think the chance that he gets convicted is high because Alvin Bragg, I think, has found his own, just like Tish James had Judge Engoron, mm-hmm. Bragg has Judge Juan Merchan, who issued a 30-page ruling last week rejecting all of Trump's pretrial motions.
Right. Yeah.
And from what I can detect, he's basically a rubber stamp for Bragg the same way that Engoron was a rubber stamp for James. So, I mean, it's hard to quantify how many ways this case really sucks. I mean, just like to begin with, what you have here at most is one misdemeanor falsification of business records case.
Yeah.
And no one is defrauded. Like there's no claim that there's a tax violation.
Right.
There's no claim that there's like a bank fraud or anything else based on these records. My friend Dan McLaughlin at National Review has analogized this. I think this is perfect. It's like Trump lied to his own checkbook. Like no one else got affected here, but he basically put something different on the line than what they meant, right? He pretended that he was paying Cohen in 2017 for the, basically once a month for ongoing legal services, when in fact he was reimbursing him in installments for the repayment of a loan, because Cohn laid out the $130,000 for the Stormy Daniels hush money thing. Now, it's important to underscore here, why didn't they just charge him with hush money? Well, because it's legal. Non-disclosure agreements. I mean, they, in a very dark way, they keep reporting it as hush money. This is the hush money case. But non-disclosure agreements are a staple of civil litigation. We always hear that, like, the parties settled and there's no comment and nobody admitted any wrongdoing and money changed hands, but we can't tell you how much. That goes on all the time. So what he did was he took this one misdemeanor transaction and he charged it as 34 felony counts.
It's just wild.
The way he did that was basically with respect to every, I think there were 11 installments because they doubled up in February when this first got rolling. It's all in 2017. And in every one, the arrangement was Cohn submits an invoice, they cut him a check, and then they make a book entry, right? Mm-hmm. It's all one transaction because it's one loan. But what Bragg did was he took every piece of paper, every invoice, every check that got cut, and every book entry, and he charged it as a separate felony.
Oh, my God.
And in the Justice Department, we actually have guidelines that tell you you're not supposed to do this. Because in terms of, like, a due process violation, what you're trying to do is basically suggest to the jury that this must be a really, really bad guy. Otherwise, why would the government charge him with 34 felonies? So the Justice Department tells you, look, don't play that game. If you need, you charge as many counts as you need to have a fair amount of basically prison time exposure that's commensurate with whatever the wrong is, and then you leave it at that. Instead, they've charged this guy like he's Osama bin Laden, right?
So
34.
he wrote a D on the check, felony. O on the check, felony.
I mean, it's incredible. So, look, if there is some likelihood that he's convicted on this, what's the process on that?
Yeah, well, in federal practice, once you're convicted, it's about 3 months to sentencing. And I think the state operates more or less the same way. So this, I think, is estimated to be like a 2 to 4 week trial. So let's say he got convicted. Just why I say it's he could get convicted of 34 counts as easily as one. The reason I say that is when you take one act and cut it into 34, the logic of convicting on one is the same as convicting on all 34, right? It's the same. It's basically the same act.
Yeah.
He probably if he got convicted by the end of April, he'd be sentenced like in July.
Wow.
And look, everything about this is political, so it's hard to analyze it as a legal matter. But if it was a normal case, he wouldn't be on trial because, by the way, the misdemeanors are 2-year statute of limitations. They couldn't have brought this case.
Oh.
He has to make it a felony to get into the 5-year statute of limitations. And even with that, he still needs the extra 1 year that Cuomo gave because of COVID that extended the statute of limitations to make this even prosecutable. Oh. And then I didn't tell you the other cute thing, which I should have, which is a misdemeanor business records violation like this becomes a felony only if you can prove that the guy falsified his business records in order to conceal another crime. And here, what Bragg is saying is the other crime that Trump was trying to conceal is a campaign finance violation.
So the whole loop closes there.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime, he's a state district attorney. He doesn't have any authority
right.
to enforce campaign finance law. And the two federal entities that do, the Justice Department and the FEC, looked at this and decided not to go after Trump.
That's just incredible.
So he's usurping the federal authority here. And get this, he says he's doing it because what happened here was Trump stole the election.
Oh, my God.
He's saying he stole the 2016 election. It was so close, and if he had disclosed these hush money agreements, that would have been all over for him, and Hillary would have won. And in the meantime, first of all, it's not a campaign finance violation. If you think it is, what that means is it would have been okay for Trump to take donations, campaign donations, and pay them to porn stars and Playboy models for hush money agreements, right? So if he had done it that way, Bragg would have figured out another way to charge him, right? They would have gotten him coming or going.
The gymnastics involved in charging him with this is just unbelievable.
Yeah, but even if Bragg was right and this was a campaign finance violation, Cohen paid the money in October. The next reporting period wouldn't have been until 2017. So it wouldn't have been disclosed until after the election was over anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, none of this makes sense from beginning to end. And he'll probably get convicted.
Oh, Jesus. Well, I guess the moral of that story is if you're a Republican doing business in New York, you got to look over your shoulder pretty closely.
Right.
Holy smokes. So we want to get into a couple of these, Dunks. I know you had some specific questions about the other cases.
Yeah, I mean, sort of before we get into the D.C. January 6th case or the Mar-a-Lago docks case, I think the timing of all of that sort of depends on what the Supreme Court ultimately does with this Trump immunity claim. I think they're currently considering it. They haven't decided if they're going to take up the immunity case. Explain to our audience, the scenarios there with the Supreme Court. Do they take it? Do they not take it? And how does that impact sort of the timing of these other trials?
So the immunity claim was important to Trump, even though I never really thought he had much of a chance to win it. The reason it was of so much importance to Trump is his strategy, especially with respect to the federal stuff, but really across the board. His strategy is delay.
Yeah.
And on the federal stuff, he wants to push all these cases as far as he can beyond Election Day, because if he wins the election, then his new Justice Department, he'll just fire
it's
Jack
over.
Smith and drop the case. He does all this stuff about will he pardon himself. He shouldn't have to pardon himself because the Justice Department would just drop the cases if they haven't been tried at that point. So the reason immunity, therefore, became important to him is that with respect to most federal criminal law, you have to litigate the whole case, including whatever legal claims you have, in front of the district court, the trial court.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole case goes up as a bundle on appeal at the end, after the guy's convicted. Whereas there's a few things which are claims that basically say it's legally inappropriate or unconstitutional to have the trial in the first place. And there's a few claims like that. Immunity is one of them. Double jeopardy would be another one. So the reason immunity was so important to Trump is because you get to appeal it prior to trial. And anytime that you have pretrial appeal, you're going to have delay. So
it fits the timeline for him.
Right. So the immunity has served his purpose in that the rule in federal court and in federal law is litigants are only in front of one court at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So once Trump appealed, the judge in Washington, Tanya Chutkan, who's an Obama appointee, she can't act on the case at all. That case is frozen right now. All the work that they would have to do to get to trial can't be done. No motions, nothing going on there until this gets resolved on appeal. So if the Supreme Court were to take this case, it wouldn't get decided until next term. So this trial never happened. Now, I don't think they're going to take it, but that is the relevance for Trump is that he's basically gotten this thing frozen for months, which makes it more hard to have a trial prior to Election Day. Not impossible, but more hard. I think the immunity, I think he's going to lose because basically there's no immunity in the Constitution. The immunity from civil lawsuits that the Supreme Court found in 1982, that was kind of in the pre-Scalia freewheeling time where the court just kind of made it up as it went along. Like if it thought policy-wise, this is what we're going to do, then this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas even though I think the logic of giving a president immunity for civil lawsuits is not different from giving it to him for criminal lawsuits, the current Supreme Court is much more textualist and originalist. Mm-hmm. And I think they're unlikely to carve that new ground because it's not in the Constitution. But what the Supreme Court has done for Trump, they've done for him outside the four corners of the Washington case. And what I mean by that is right around the time they granted, they said that they would hear, let me back up. Around the time that Jack Smith was trying to get them to take the immunity case, they granted review to a bunch of the January 6th Capitol riot defendants who want to claim that the government's use against them of the obstruction statute is unconstitutional because it's not the activity that Congress was targeting when it had enacted that statute. Mm-hmm. The court did grant review on that, and they're not going to hear it until, I think, April 16th.
Okay.
Which means they won't decide it till the end of June. And the reason that's so important is what Smith has filed against Trump is a 4-count indictment in Washington. The main 2 counts are that obstruction count.
Oh, so it's the overlap. I mean, they're going to have to decide that one way or another.
Right. And I think as a practical matter, if you're Judge Chutkan, if the Supreme Court is going to give guidance on the main statute in the case, you really can't have the trial until the court decides whatever they're going to decide on.
So at a minimum, that's July.
Yeah, but I also think they're likely, and I've been complaining about Smith's indictment for months, because I think if you're going to indict somebody who's a candidate for president, not leave aside that he's a former president, he's like the main party candidate. then it ought to be what Bill Barr used to call a meat and potatoes crime, right? Like it got to be a very clear crime.
Yeah, you don't want to set precedent with it, right?
Right. And here, what did he do? You know, all they've talked about for 3 years is the insurrection. Insurrection's a federal crime. It's on the books. It's been on the books since 1870. No one's been charged with insurrection. And against Trump, they brought 2 counts of obstruction, a civil rights violation, and a fraud violation. They're pushing the envelope on every one. And I think if the Supreme Court gives any relief to the Capitol riot guys, it's a problem for Smith because his application of obstruction to Trump is much more tenuous, in my view, than the Justice Department's application of it to the rioters. Because what it all comes down to is, what is corrupt conduct? Corrupt is a very ambiguous term.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say a guy takes a flagpole and he hits a cop over the head with it. You know that you're doing something that violates the law when you do that, right? But what did Trump do? It's alleged that Trump basically took John Eastman's cockamamie legal theory and argued that Pence should be able to invalidate state-certified electoral votes. If a frivolous legal theory was a felony obstruction, I could have indicted 6 of them a day when I was a prosecutor.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's a climb for Smith, and it runs afoul of what the Supreme Court periodically tells federal prosecutors, which is you have to stick with what Congress was getting at when they enacted these statutes. And what the court doesn't like, especially this court, is where you take, and this goes on all the time in the political corruption area, you stretch these statutes that were not actually intended for political corruption to impose someone's idea, usually the progressive idea, of what good governance is.
Yeah.
And what the court basically says is, look, if Congress wants to write a statute like that, they can try and we'll see. But this is not what these statutes were meant for.
So some of these statutes were intended for financial crimes, correct?
Right. Like the fraud one in particular. It's a conspiracy to defraud the government. And early in the 20th century, the court started to let it be allowed in areas where the government wasn't quite saying that they'd been defrauded, but there was a generally deceptive scheme that made it difficult for the government to carry out some legitimate business. And you can see right off the bat how that would, how that could be stretched into virtually anything. And that's basically what they're saying here is by Trump positing a legal theory that he believed to be false or that he knew to be bogus, he was undermining the ability of Congress to carry out a constitutional and statutory function of counting the electoral votes.
Jeez, it's a lot of calisthenics from the legal community on all of this. Andy, we only have a couple more minutes left. I could talk all day with him about all of this stuff. But before we leave you, one is to invite you back whenever you got time, because this is fascinating.
Yeah, we'd love to hear stories about the blind shake.
Yeah, we want stuff like that too, right? Far beyond what we've got here. But I do want to get your take on the whole Fani Willis situation and this disaster as it plays out in Georgia, because to the naked, non-legally trained eye, it looks like a complete catastrophe.
Yeah, the thing that drives me nuts about this, Josh, is everybody's into the salacious details for now, right? It's the same. You just mentioned the blind shake case. I always used to complain, like Judge Mukasey, who later became Attorney General Mukasey, tried one of the greatest cases ever tried, as far as I'm concerned. It was a 10-month trial. He did a great job. But nobody knew, because every day we were on trial, they were having this other thing in California. You may have heard of it. United States against Orenthal James Simpson.
Yeah, vaguely aware.
And the thing is that they have, they had sex and race and drugs and rock and roll, and we just had like the future of civilization. So nobody gave it.
Well, laid a good groundwork for your future media career, Andy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and plus every time the blind shake did something, I got another 15 minutes. It was great, So here we have a situation similar in that, like, the big problem with the Atlanta case is the Atlanta case. Mm-hmm. It's not whether Fani Willis or Fannie Willis hired her boyfriend with county funds that without getting approval, and then maybe committed a federal crime because they get federal funding.
Right.
So, if she's getting kickbacks off money that she's paying him, or she's deriving benefit because they're going away on vacation or whatever they do, that could be federal criminal exposure for her. And of course, everybody's interested now, and these two bird brains got up there and testified the way they testified.
Yeah.
I understand that, by the way, that that Wade, the guy, the special counsel, special prosecutor, he apparently changed his testimony in. Was it in the divorce proceeding? Anyway, he changed it where he had said he hadn't had a relationship or whatever. And he changed it, but he didn't. He apparently had denied it, but he didn't change it from denying it to acknowledging it. He changed it from denying it to Fifth Amendment. Which I have to say, I've never heard of that before.
The point Holmes keeps making is, watching everything happening in Georgia. If you're Donald Trump's legal team, don't you want these people on the case?
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you got to be careful what you ask for here. I don't think Fannie should go anywhere if you're a defense team.
But here's going to that exact point. What case did they bring here? They brought like one of the most difficult, sophisticated criminal cases you could bring. And when you look at this group, do you really think that they did an airtight RICO case?
Doesn't feel like it.
My problem with this case from the beginning has been they took these 19 people, right? And they indicted them as a big conspiracy. The only thing these 19 people have ever done together is get indicted. They didn't, there's like little circles of people who knew each other and who interacted. But these were 19 people who all just wanted to get the result of the election reversed. And the problem for them is it's not a crime to try to get the result of an election reversed. There's a procedure in every state for doing that. So it's a problem for a prosecutor because in the criminal law, a conspiracy is an agreement by two or more people to violate a criminal law. And if you don't have a crime that they've agreed on, you don't have a conspiracy. So she tried to paper this over by indicting a RICO. And the thing is, RICO's designed, even at the state level, and which is an analog of the federal statute that was enacted in 1971. But the idea in a RICO is you're indicting the entity rather than the individual crimes committed by the entity. But the entity's like the Gambino family in the sense that, everybody wants to be in the Gambino family. They identify as being in the Gambino family. And the objective of having the Gambino family is to continue its existence and to amass money and power, right? That's what a RICO is. These 19 people, they didn't identify as an organization. That's like Fannie's calling them an organization. They didn't think of, I'm in the Trump RICO, let's overturn the election organization. And the other thing is, whether they were successful or unsuccessful, this thing was going to end on January 20th, 2021, one way or the other, right? They were either going to get the election overturned or Biden was going to become president. But this is not like an organization that was going to continue in time and space. So to me, the problem with that case is she doesn't have a conspiracy and she doesn't have a RICO. She might have a bunch of little crimes because sometimes, people who've agreed to do something that's legal will commit crimes in the course of doing that.
Sure.
So, maybe they access voter information. I think that's what Sidney Powell.
Yeah, the Sidney Powell plea agreement. Yeah, exactly.
But they don't have a RICO, and the real tell here is in a normal case, when the first cooperating defendants come in and they want to plead guilty, you make them plead guilty to the main count. Any prosecutor does this because what you want is for them to come into court and say, yes, there was a racketeering organization. I was in it. President Trump was in it. Here's what I did. Here's what he did. Then you convince the public that you actually have a case, right? So they've taken 4 pleas, no RICO guilty pleas, and not a single person who's pled guilty is going to do a day in jail notwithstanding that they told us they had to bring this case because, you may remember this, our democracy was hanging by a thread.
Yes.
Apparently that's not worth a day in prison, though.
And you don't think the legal minds of our time are operating down in Hotlanta at this point? Andy, I got to get you out of here, but I have just a very short question for you. If you're looking at the whole playing field from a Trump point of view, if you're in his attorney box here, which of these concerns you the most?
Washington.
Yeah.
I don't think we didn't talk about the Florida case because I ranted too long on the other ones, but the Florida case, it's very hard in a classified information case to get the case to trial because the law that applies is the Classified Information Procedures Act. The judge has to make all the admissibility rulings on what classified information can come in prior to the trial, and then you can have appeals. So even when you're trying to get those cases to trial, they're hard to get to trial.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will now think, as far as the New York thing is concerned, even though I think there's a high probability that Trump gets convicted, I think people now think New York is just totally rigged and they have it in for Trump.
Totally agree.
New York. But I think if he gets convicted on something that, a 2 to 3 month trial where people get reminded every day of how much they dislike the Capitol riot and the stuff that went up to it, and then he gets convicted on one of those 4 counts, I think that's really going to hurt him, which is why they're fighting so hard to try to push it past Election Day.
Yeah. Well, listen, absolute best in the business, Andy McCarthy of National Review. Thanks so much for joining us. Anytime you got some spare minutes hanging around, you're more than welcome back to the Ruthless Variety program.
Thanks, guys. It was my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Boy, that guy is a riot. I really wish I was there for the interview. I hope we can have him back again soon.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. There are like 2 or 3 people on the face of the planet that can break down super complex legal cases in a way that I understand immediately. And he is one of them. And he's, I think, amongst the most incredible of all of them, because his point of view just like immediately resonates, right? It's like, oh, okay. And then he's like, well, but you didn't know this part.
Yeah.
You didn't know this part.
And it's because he's got the legal bona fides.
Yeah,
Got prosecuted like one of the world's worst terrorists.
Just the way that he walked through the New York criminal case in Cy Vance and the DOJ and everything before it got to where it is now is just incredible stuff for our audience. I'm really glad we could have him on.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll hope you get a better sense of everything that Donald Trump is facing here and the ridiculous nature in some of it that he's facing. But anyway, with all that said, it's a big Tuesday episode. I think we did it, pal.
All right, Google Gemini, take us to the close.
Thanks so much to Andy McCarthy, another banger of an episode. Remember, subscribe to the YouTube. It's much more fun in video. So next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Thursday. Stay ruthless.